class, but as I was writing, I realized that I was writing this speech for this occasion. So because we had to write about just something inspirational or to inspire the crowd, and I found that the answer to that prompt through badminton. But to specifically address this team, I'm gonna just go off script a little bit. So I think when you guys joined this team, you guys were probably aware of all of our expectations of you, because last year we were second in the league, and those are some pretty high standards to uphold. So going into that, I was skeptical of our success, because I mean, you guys weren't the team that we had before, but as the season went on, I was able to see how much passion there is in this team, and that how much people actually care about this sport. And we found a lot of new art for this sport, and that was really great for me. I felt really proud of that, glad of that, and yeah, it makes me feel better about the future. Just fast forward to leagues. I felt a lot of camaraderie that day, and what I mean by that is, when we were all just like hanging out outside the gym, I mean, there were a lot of you guys supporting us in our quest for CCS, and yeah, we were all just hanging out there, and I felt really good because you guys supported us. And before, when I was playing badminton, I wasn't with the club, so when I was at a tournament, I was all by myself, and I didn't have any support. All the other club kids had support. I was playing with the club kids, and their friends were cheering them on. No one was cheering me on. But you guys were here for me, and thank you for that. Also, Stanley, my partner, for doubles. Stanley, thank you. Thank you for being my partner. And it's really great to see how there's someone on this team that mirrors the same passion for the sport that I have. And when I met the team before this, I didn't see that passion, and it's really such a great feeling to see that someone else here cares about the sport as much as I do, and dedicates himself to the sport as much as I do. So Stanley, please, thank you, Stanley, for being my partner. Please give Stanley a hand.
Boy, come on, man.
So now on to my lit speech. This is just a story. A child sits alone in a gym on a summer morning. He had never been inside this gym before, let alone been inside a gym his entire life. He was overweight, but there he was, sitting alone in that gym on a summer morning. His doctor had told him he was on the verge of becoming both obese and diabetic. At the age of 11, he was 120 pounds. He tried to exercise on his own and eat less, but it was too hard. He could not find a sport that interested him until he found badminton. He and his family played that sport in their backyard until sundown every day. Finally, it looked like he found a sport to help him lose weight and ultimately save his life. That was the child who sat alone in the gym on a summer morning, waiting for not only his first badminton class to start, but also the longest and hardest journey of his life. He was unsure what to expect from a badminton lesson. His knowledge of the sport was confined to plastic birdies and a grass court. It was not until the class started that he fully realized what he had gotten himself into. In hindsight, the conditioning was not hard, but at the time, the boy was not able to keep up with the rest of the class. He was not accustomed to physical activity. At the end of the class, the child was exhausted. After that day, the boy woke up early every morning for a month and attended the same training class. He was making good progress in the sport. His coach told him he was a fast learner, but his body could not keep up. He became frustrated with himself. He finally found a sport to pursue, but his body was preventing him from doing so. Eventually, he felt just like giving up. The frustration was too great. And one day, the boy who prided him so much on never crying climbed into his mother's car and wept. With a look of concern on her face, she asked him what was wrong. Choking through sobs, the child explained to her how he kept losing to another boy in the class. He felt like quitting badminton then and there, but he knew he could not, for he had come to love the game too much, and he did not want to disappoint his coach. After that day, the boy continued to play badminton throughout middle school and high school. By 7th grade, badminton had pulled the child away from diabetes and obesity. At the height of his fitness in 8th grade, the boy suffered a spinal fracture. What was supposed to be a 1-month injury took half a year to heal. To the boy, it was both psychological and physical torture. for upon his first steps on the badminton court, his love for the game and exercise had only grown. So, for 6 months, the only physical activity he could partake in was physical therapy. The child dreamt of the day when he could sit up in bed, pick up something off the ground, or even walk without pain. After those 6 months, the boy attempted to return to badminton, but it seemed impossible. Everything he had worked for over the past 3 years was gone. He was no longer in shape. He could scarcely hit the bird anymore. He felt like quitting. But he did not want to waste the past 3 years of training, so he fought the urge to quit and clawed his way back to the badminton court. Upon entering high school, the boy had just finished recovering from the fracture. He joined his high school's badminton team, and as a freshman shot straight to the top of the roster. He managed to get through his first high school season despite a number of shoulder and knee injuries. He continued to train over the summer and throughout the sophomore year in preparation for the coming season. That was last year. The year of 2011 was a particularly grueling year for him. Before his second season, he had to undergo heart surgery. But he was still able to play that year, but he was in poor physical shape. Despite that, he was awarded the first seed in the freshman and sophomore championship tournament. He was considered the best of the freshmen and sophomores in his league. He was so happy. But during preparation for the tournament, he felt a massive stabbing pain in his chest. He went to the hospital promptly thereafter, where he learned he suffered from a collapsed lung. Though this was a small setback, this meant that he could not compete in the tournament. He was hugely disappointed. That #1 seed meant the world to him. It seemed like everything he had worked so hard for was manifested itself in that seed. It was the first time in his life where he was the best at something. And he was even more disappointed when his friends later told him he would have won that tournament. Summer of 2011 came around, and as usual, he continued to train. He was determined to repeat his previous season's success, so he trained harder than ever. He had made remarkable progress, but fate would not let him off so easily. While training, he suddenly felt that familiar stabbing pain in his chest, and he knew what had happened. He remembered the doctors telling him that if his lungs were to collapse again, a more serious surgery would be involved. Fearing the inevitable, he hid his pain from his parents and coaches. He could not withstand another setback in his progress. But within a few weeks, he eventually succumbed to the pain. Surgery was soon to follow, and he would be forced to stop training for another month. I was getting tired of all the surgery, tired of climbing all of the obstacles, tired of being constantly separated from the sport I loved. I felt as if fate was out to make my life miserable. But just like after all my other surgeries, I returned to the sport. I wanted to keep fighting, to never give up in the face of apparent failure. After all this pain, I learned one thing. I learned to never give up on something you love, no matter how hard it is, because when we overcome obstacles, it will make the pursuit of that something you love all the sweeter. But if we fail, or simply give up in the face of difficulty, we will be labeled as failures. Yes, you may be able to hide the truth from other people, but deep down inside, you will know the truth. And at the end of the day, you will have to live with what you see in the mirror. It is not the obstacle that defines us, but rather how we react to it. Many people may have a common obstacle, but individual reaction makes the difference between success and failure. It is what turns us from a statistic to a person. And who wants to be called a failure, a loser, a quitter? As my brother says, a lack of success is not indicative of failure. But I say the lack of success is only justified if an effort is made to succeed. Despite all the blood, sweat, and tears of this journey, I always managed to see the light at the end of the tunnel because I constantly clawed my way forward. I did not give up on myself, or on the very thing that saved my life. I always dreamed of achieving some kind of fame. I dreamed of being featured in the Mercury News upon winning CCS. I know that isn't possible, but that was my light at the end of the tunnel, and that was enough to keep me moving forward. Anytime I found myself in a hospital bed, I've always pushed myself to remember, the pain is temporary, glory is forever.
You know, Max, I want to thank you for that speech. It's interesting enough that at CCS, Mr. and Mrs. Cam and I were talking about Maxwell and all the medical conditions that he went through and still persevered. You know, he still had the passion for the sport and still pushed himself on. And we were just so proud as we were talking. And your parents are very proud of you. So thank you so much for all that you do for yourself and for this team. Our last last student speaker or player speaker is from our current president, Nancy Huynh. Please welcome her.